Alright, what's going on, guys? Out of all the games I've ever played, Elden Ring holds the #1 spot when it comes to mastery of the art of subtlety, holding countless details that would normally be missed and overlooked, but if caught by an investigative eye, make the world come to life that much more. And it's why even now, 2 years offset from the game's release, there are still major questions that we're all investigating, keeping the hunt alive for answers, and today that hunt brings us to one of Elden Ring's scariest and toughest enemies. Today we'll be discussing the Revenants. These terrifying amalgamations of limbs, and the strange curse that caused them to take this form. But to understand the Revenants, we need to also understand the Wraithcallers, and the connection that ties them together may also help us unravel one of Elden Ring's biggest mysteries, one that I've wanted to explore here on the channel for a very long time. But as we dive in today, let me give a big shout out to the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by Wanted Dead. Wanted Dead is a third-person action game that focuses on high-octane combat in a cool mix of cyberpunk aesthetic and the vibe of a late 80s action movie. Battle through every level with stylistic gunfu combat, with a high skill ceiling, hardcore difficulty, and a memorable boss fight at the end of every level, which is right up our alley. Wanted Dead is a love letter to the classic era of video games, with an atmosphere to bring you back to the days of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. But if you want to test your hand in the training arena, or take a break from the challenging missions to participate in mini-games or side quests, there's always something new to do. The latest update for the game has just gone live, with Xbox One and PS4 to follow in a few weeks, and even more are on the way to make this adventure that much more captivating. So I highly recommend checking out Wanted Dead today, and you can do so using my link down in the description or the pinned comment on Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. So be sure to check it out, and a massive thank you to Wanted Dead for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back into it. Our journey today begins in the swamps of the Liurnian Forest. When the player first arrives in this biome, they'll find themselves following a path of stone walls, guided by the eerie flickering of a blue flame. But unbeknownst to the player, choosing to go down this path leads them to the Laskiar ruins, a place shrouded not only in mystery, but also horror and sorrow. This location holds the player's first encounter with the Wraithcallers. These decrepit, amalgamous creatures that crawl along the ground wield a bell as their only weapon, with a chime that summons up vengeful spirits to seek out foes. In the description of the Wraith-calling bell tells us a little bit about who they are. Bell used by worshippers of the Revenants. Ring the bell using FP to summon prowling Wraiths. Wraiths are said to be the vengeful spirits of those who died when cursed. So this gives us a few key details about our subjects. There are two types of Wraithcallers: those that hobble along the ground, traveling through yellow wraith-colored portals, lying in wait beyond the realm of sight to ambush their targets. And then there are the wraith-calling horseback riders, who are a slightly stronger variation and use the unique abilities of their horse to hide in mist and fire their wraiths from afar. But a much stronger variant of the Wraithcallers can be found nearby. These are the Revenants, royalty among the Wraithcallers, and rightfully so, as they are significantly more powerful, also possessing the ability to travel through portals like their wraith-calling kin. But unlike the others, they do not summon wraiths. Instead, they exude the color of gold, seemingly implying that the power of those vengeful spirits runs through them. But to fully understand these creatures, we need to compare their anatomy. The standard Wraithcallers are primarily humanoid, but have 4 arms with 2 torsos stacked on top of one another. But the Revenants are entirely different. Mirroring their increase in strength, the Revenants have an extra torso with a total of 6 arms and a big separation of their ribcage, as is a common theme in the lands between. And to express their royalty, they wear a large golden crown. But another physical observation we can make about the Wraithcallers and the Revenants are the physical locations in which we find them. Although Wraithcallers tend to be found at pretty various locations, even so far as the subterranean shunning grounds, they are primarily condensed in the Liurnian swamp. Revenants, on the other hand, tend to be found in more varied locations, such as Celia Hideaway and even Miquella's Haligtree. But barring their presence in the Haligtree and the Wraithcallers of the subterranean shunning grounds, which do have simple explanations for their presence, the common thread tying all of them together are that they're either Liurnian or Carian territory, and the fact that they are primarily found in ruins under these territory lines suggests to me that whoever they were before getting cursed lived and worshipped in these lands, and that may just be the very reason for their fate. There's a note the player can buy from one of the merchants that tells interesting information about the Revenants. It reads, "The crawling royal Revenants and their followers are all cursed. Healing powers will harm rather than mend." And this is perhaps the best way to deal with the royal Revenants, as these spells do a massive chunk of damage and instantly stagger them. And it forces one to ask, what exactly is this curse? In the last lore video, we talked about the singing bats and the Song of Lament. They too are cursed beings, misshapen into this hideous form. And one thing we theorized in that video was that they may have once been royalty and priestesses of the Erdtree, playing a role in the ancient order of life and death, as evidenced by their usage of the Rancor Call spell, which could point to the idea of whatever this curse was, connecting the recipients to spirits. But unlike the Revenants, the singing bats are not affected by healing spells. Healing spells originate from the Golden Order, drawing power from the current state of the Elden Ring with the Rune of Death manipulated, and we can clearly see the damage that manipulation can cause. When talking about curses in Elden Ring, it makes me think of an old tweet from the Elden Ring account describing the setting before the game ever released. In the wake of the shattering, a blight claimed the mind of many a creature and man. Beware their chaotic frenzy. So I think it is more than safe to assume that the shattering had far more effects than simply breaking the cycle of life and death. But could those effects have been targeted? Throughout the world of Elden Ring, we can find these many mysterious sites, where the corpses of nobles are sitting in chairs, clasping their hands together in prayer, or looking off into the distance. And although these nobles are a recipient of a blessing, the intended effect of the shattering, we learn that in reality, it's been anything but. The old aristocrat cowl has a description that reads, "Cowl worn by nobles in the capital, garb favored by the aged. Abandoning their birthplace after the shattering, these undead wanderers are the pitiful product of everlasting life." So this appears to imply that when the shattering happened, certain groups were given immortality, and although that would appear to be a blessing for some, such as the demigods, clearly these nobles are still aging and rotting, unable to die of natural causes. And although this effect is somewhat apparent in the Wraithcallers and the Revenants, given that they share that same hollowed look, they also seem to have access to connection to the spirit world. However, that connection to the spirits may have been in place long before their curse, however amplified due to the manipulation of the Golden Order. But to explain their vulnerability to Erdtree and Golden Order healing spells, it's no secret that Liurnia and Leyndell were at war, and the Wraithcallers and Revenants, being inhabitants of Liurnia, would have been enemies of the Erdtree. And even now, long after the war has passed, the Erdtree still bears its wrath at them. But that's just one idea. It could also be due to the fact that the Wraithcallers have such a strong connection to the spirit world, that whenever the shattering happened and the flow of death was disrupted, they became twisted with the souls on the other side, and that bleeding over corrupted their form. And we have some evidence for this. Wraithcallers drop Grave Violets when defeated, and the Revenants drop Ghost Glowwort, both items with direct references to death rituals and spirit tuning. But it is worth noting that the Wraiths they summon have a distinct yellow color, which is strikingly different than the normal blue that should be associated with spirits. It is very similar to the color of Deathblight, which too is technically an Erdtree Curse, although in a corrupted form. But it doesn't entirely add up. The Revenants have a very strong holy resistance, as well as a tiny chance to drop a sacrificial twig, which is said to be a piece of an Erdtree. And if everything else we said there is true, there are definitely a few contradictions that need explaining. There's a location in the northeast of Liurnia, near the Frenzied Flame village, where you can find a circle of 5 petrified nobles in chairs. However, if the player approaches these nobles, they become ambushed by tons of Wraithcallers. It's a very terrifying interaction if the player isn't aware, but more importantly draws a lore connection. What are all these Wraithcallers doing in this location near these nobles, and why do they wait until approached to emerge? In my opinion, this gives the appearance that they were guarding the nobles, and we have some evidence that may back that up. Nobles can be found all across the lands between, but many of them have picked up the art of sorcery. Many of these noble sorcerers can be found in King's Realm ruins outside of Caria Manor, where a ghost of one talks of his allegiance to Iji. But also in these ruins we find a boss variant of a Revenant, titled the Royal Revenant, and it's guarding a chest containing one of Iji's weapons. So these two placements clearly show some kind of alliance between the Revenants, the Wraithcallers, and the nobles, but to what significance I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps the sacrificial twigs were given to the Revenants by the nobles, and are the source of that holy resistance that we see. After all, we don't find Revenants anywhere near the Erdtree, but the nobles once hailed from Leyndell. So the theory on all of this is that the Wraithcallers and the Revenants are a cursed and corrupted version of a people that once thrived in Liurnia, although now only horrendous mockeries remain. The details of their curse are shrouded in mystery and only really explainable through speculation, but nonetheless give us a glimpse into the darker side of the Erdtree and the horrific consequences of the shattering. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you agree with the theories proposed in this video, or do you have a different idea on the Revenants and their curse? I look forward to reading the comments down below. Either way though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.